And welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. We have the illustrious, none other than Tim Alexander, my co-host, and of course his title, Lord Sterling. He was actually, his ancestor was one of the literally founders of the United States of America, which is an experiment by the Most High God to actually create a republic, the only form of government that's acceptable to the Creator.
Let me correct you. The Major General Lord Sterling of the Revolutionary War wasn't an ancestor. He was a kinsman, as was the first Earl Sterling in the early 1600s, who actually owned all of Scotland or all of Canada except for Quebec. The guy I had on with the three of us were on Monday, Jeff DeVillay, his direct ancestor was the Major General, the Marquis de Lafayette, who also fought on the American side.
Right.
And he and my kinsman, Major General Lord Sterling, at the Valley Forge encampment that brutal winter, their houses were right across the road in headquarters, and in fact, they're still there. It's a historic site.
Right. Now, the point I was going to make, Tim, is that...
And I mean, that doesn't mean I'm anything special. I'm not. But it means that I care about this country because my ancestors, the Alexanders, my great-great-grandfather, three greats, fought in the Revolutionary Army from North Carolina. And he put his butt on the line, as did his father-in-law, my four-great-grandfather. And, I hate to see what's happening in this country.
Right.
The globalists are destroying it, and they keep getting us into more and more wars. Speaking of which,
Tim, let me finish one comment here.
Conflict. The United States Navy is now going to send destroyers to escort cargo ships in the Persian Gulf.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, that's nuts. And Iran seized one ship, and I'm not sure why. It hasn't been properly explained yet. If it has, I haven't read it. Why they seized this ship. Now, it wasn't technically an American flag ship. It was flagged in... one of these little countries is kind of like a Marshall Islands flag, which is kind of a commonwealth to the United States.
Right.
So it kind of was and wasn't an American flag ship. There were no Americans on board. And of course, flagship, there are flags of convenience. Probably the biggest, Liberia was always, they had more ships out than anybody, simply because they had very easy laws, very cheap. So companies flag their ships in Liberia, sometimes in Panama. That doesn't mean they really have any connection to either of those places. Right. Anyway, nothing really has happened, but we jumped over this. So we're sending our ships through the strait. All U.S. flag cargo ships now will be escorted by U.S. Navy warships as they go through the Strait of Hormuz. This is an unnecessary provocation. You hear this stuff and you read it and you say, oh, why? Why? They want to blow up the world? And I think, of course, the answer is yes.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to mention something now that you've had your Lord Sterling rant. And I'm going to give you a little bit of glory here, by the way. Your ancestors supported the formation of the only form of government that's acceptable on earth. It's not democracy. It's not an aristocracy. It's a republic. Which means, just like the ancient kingdom of Israel, which is the first republic, which means they had no king. That's why they would get very mad. God got very mad, and when they set up a king over them, and he became apostate. And eventually King David took over from him. But in fact, remember, God said he was a man after my own heart. Even though he was a murderer of Uriah and took his wife and did all these other horrible things, he'd return and repent, and he said, you cannot sin against man. And this is right in the Bible, in Psalms. It says, you can only sin against God. And what's happening right now is we as a republic, 78% of Americans consider themselves Christians. 78% will say that on a poll they're Christians. But many of those Christians supported not only Democrats, but Republicans that have warmonger policies that support the state of it's a real hell. And now we can't abandon Israel, but on the other hand, we can't let them do whatever they want to please. And we're also right now inviting hundreds of thousands of Muslims into this country. Many of the ones that are coming in are actually flying back once they get a full belly and fighting for ISIS against us. At the same time,
we're done in Europe. That's not by accident, by the way.
Not by accident. By the way, we're dropping supplies for these countries, like inside ISIS and ISIL.
For ISIS.
Right. So here's the problem. We're on both sides of this issue because America, and by the way, the word America, it goes back to an Incan word, which is Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, and the actual name America means the land of the dragon. Did you know that? America means the land of the dragon.
Well, I thought it came from Americus Vespucius, but
no, it wasn't from Americo Vespucci, the Portuguese map maker.
I know what you're talking about. That was it Malayan or Inca?
It was Inca.
Serpent god.
It was Aztec. I'm sorry, Aztec. I mean
Aztec.
The Aztec.
Okay.
Aztec. Now here's even the symbols, by the way, in the American dollar bill, a lot of them are Aztec because the high-level Masons absorbed those and put them into the prophetic warnings about what America was to become. Because they wanted, if you go back to the Voynich documents of the illegitimate son of Sir Francis Bacon of Queen Elizabeth I, he was a wizard, okay? And he actually wrote in the Voynich document with very arcane language the fact that he prophesied the new Atlantis, which is America, okay? That's what they wanted. They wanted to...
Also, remember, George Washington was a Mason, but he was a believer in God, and he warned people, particularly fellow Masons, that there was an element attempting to take over the highest levels of Masonry that was demonic in nature, and he warned he was very serious.
Yeah, but
about
although they consider themselves good and mad Masons, and this is another confusion on it. Once you've reached the 17th level of the Orc Rite, you have to accept the fact that the name of God is Yahweh, Baal, and Osiris, which means the creator God is only one of three. The Baal, the fertility god, and Osiris, the god of the underworld, which is another title for Satan, is also part of the Godhead. And so, although they appear good and even do good things, like the prophecies of George Washington, which are actually written down, you have to understand that all Masons, whether they call themselves white Masons or dark, and by the way, this goes back to the family of Rand and Ron Paul. They're fairly heavily Masonic. People need to understand that. Same as Obama. He's a 32nd degree Mason. The Masons are pretty well everywhere. Jeb Bush, George Bush, Bill Clinton. These are high-level Masons, every single one of them. Now, what we have to do is we have to call them to order and start calling them to repent. What's going on right now is we are so close to this closure of the strait. Now, people say, well, that won't have anything to do. It's just in the Middle East. If the derivatives market,
the overwhelming majority of all seaborne oil goes through there. I mean, you're talking about an instantaneous, massive hit on a global economy that is absolutely teetering on the precipice of a total collapse. Anyway,
couldn't say it better. Tim, what's going to happen is it's like taking your thumbs and putting them on somebody's carotid arteries with, in wrestling, you're not allowed to do this. Take your thumbs and squeeze the carotid arteries on both sides of someone's brain because they're going to instantly die. And this will be like that. What will happen is the derivatives market will bail in every pension fund, your bank accounts. In fact, the Federal Reserve and the government's already stated this, not only in Europe, but in the Canadian government and the American over the last 3 years. They're prepared to take every single cent you have in the bank. Every derivative now is, we call a house of cards ready to collapse the world economy and steal every cent you have in the bank, all your pension funds, and anything you have in any value. They're going to get their paws on it. And people say, no, they won't do that. They publicly stated it's not a theory, is it?
Yeah. They think your money is their money.
They can see you on unsecured.
For them, and they own us, and they're demonic, and they're playing their game. And by the way, these characters, you can call them the global banking cartel, you can call them Netanyahu Zionists, you can call them Illuminati. They are in their end game. This is their end game now for the New World Order. Their end game involves killing off most of the human race and enslaving the rest, except for their super elite.
I have a feeling that Tim Alexander and Dr. Bill Deagle and many other patriots are at the tippy top of their list.
To be
but you know what?
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to be a martyr for the Most High God because God will rescue us. He will save us because we're in His will. Better die in glory, as I say.
You want to go to hell?
Better day to die than now. Tim, some of the best things you say are on the break, I tell you.
I know. I'm going to have to get a little tape recorder, and you just said as we were going on, rewind what you just said. I think, oh boy, Grandpa's brain here. There's several things are going on. For one thing, some of the more neocon mainstream media in the United States has been suggesting that that Assad is on his last, because he has taken some big hits lately. I don't think so. I think there's a whole lot of fight left. But what has happened, we, through Turkey has sent basically a small army south into Syria, and with the Israelis are sending even more and more people all the time north from Lebanon and the Golan Heights into Syria, and there have been several instances where Israeli Air Force jets have basically bombed Syrian army troops and missile forces, etc. Now, yesterday, Syria got in a good hit. It blew up a major weapons depot for ISIS and killed at least 25 of their people. I guess I always say, step back from the trees and look at the forest. And the thing to get out of all this is, even though Assad has been, and the Syrian people have been kicking their butts, and these are foreign mercenaries being brought in, even though they've been kicking their butts, the United States, Israel, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf Cooperative States are they're double downing. They're upping the ante considerably by putting a lot more people, a lot more money, and also, a lot of American-made TOW missiles were used in the north. They almost have taken over a very key province in northern Syria. Now, Syria hit back. The defense minister in the Syrian government went to Iran, which is very rare. Right. And I don't think he's been there for a couple of years. And he had a meeting with the senior Iranian officials, including their defense minister. And the Iranians said in no uncertain terms, they're not going to allow Syria to be overcome. And they're there, and they'll do whatever it takes. Now, okay, that's one thing that's happening. If you look at what's happening in Yemen, it's very interesting. You have a new king on the throne in Saudi Arabia. It hasn't been long since his half-brother died and he became king. He had been the crown prince. Many of our American generals told the Saudis, do not get involved in a war in Yemen. It will be, to your destruction. They didn't listen. They've sent in their Air Force, and they have some of the best planes money can buy, from the Tornado, the Typhoon, the F-15 Eagle. You name it, they've got it. And they've bombed a lot. They had to use us to pinpoint a number of places. Even still, they've killed children right and left, 1,000 to 2,000 civilians. They've really given themselves a black eye in the Arab community. And then they decided that they were going to send in ground forces with the Saudi Army and the Saudi National Guard. The Saudi National Guard, it's not like our National Guard. It's actually the elite force, and it's basically the Praetorian Guard for the House of Saud. They have over 1,000 princes and so forth. This is their super elite, always headed by a prince. And they had all these forces on the border, and they told them to go in. And guess what happened? The people loaded up and took off. A very, very Arab thing to do. If the raid that your leader tells you is you think is too dangerous, and you're not going to get any money out of it, you don't go in that direction. You go in the opposite direction. That's exactly what happened. They left. They left their bases. Now, rather than turning around and seeing that the handwriting is on the wall, they doubled down in Yemen. So they kicked the latest crown prince out, replaced him by a young guy, a young prince. He's the first grandson generation of the founder to be a crown prince, and they also have a new deputy crown prince. And they did some other restructuring, but all these people are the key players in this drive towards war in Yemen, and also supporting the war against Syria and Iran.
You're talking about Prince Salman, right?
Of a very dangerous situation developing, and then of course you have this situation where, for what other reason, and there probably was a legitimate reason why the Iranians stopped a ship going through its territorial waters for some reason or another. I don't think anybody was hurt, nothing like that. But what other? Good, bad, what other? We now have a situation where all American flag ships are going to have a destroyer escorting them through Iranian water. That's asking for trouble, but they want trouble.
Well, here's what I'm going to ask you, Tim. That was a very good rant, by the way. Here's the issue. I'm going to lay out a couple things that I consider the problem I'm going to call mini scenario. Number one, someday the Syrians, when they get the American fleet within 180 miles of the Russian-based the Hoot anti-cavitation super torpedoes and these Iskander, they call it the Alexander Iskander missile systems, and they have the S-400. The U.S. Navy is going to go to the bottom of the Mediterranean. Number one. Number two, when it gets to the point where Assad thinks it's going to happen. I know Syrian people. Let's put it this way: I have Syrian blood. Okay, my great grandfather owned a caravan and went from Damascus to China twice a year. Okay, so I got to tell you right now, there's nobody on earth other than Russians and Syrians that are that as tough as these people are. They're not defeatable, okay, in the same way as these Yemeni people in the mountains. Do you think the Saudi Arabian army wants to get in the mountains of Yemen? It's entirely mountainous. These people are like mountain goats. Do you think you're going to fight and beat them? You can't. And I don't care how many missiles.
They held out against everything thrown at them.
The same as the Russians tried to crush the same as the Russians tried to crush
and paid manpower.
Yeah. Okay, let me finish my little mini rant here. Then I want you to respond, because I think what's going to happen is they up the ante. You're going to see the Syrians literally threaten that they're going to start taking out the U.S. Navy. Number two, you're going to see the Russians move Russian fleets in, not just Iranian. You're going to see the Iranians close the Strait of Hormuz, and all they need to do is not even put out and activate their missile systems. They need to make one phone call to Lloyd's in London and say, we've decided to, quote, strategically close the strait. To American traffic or any cargo ships bring supplies down to the American carrier fleet. And by the way, within 4 days of no carrier fleet supplies arriving, to they keep that fleet going, which costs $218 million per day to keep them in the area, roughly, in the southern Aden Gulf. That fleet's finished. No eggs, no bacon, no gasoline, no fuel, nothing.
A few months ago, we had a destroyer in the Black Sea, and two Russian planes came by, one unarmed but with some ECM, electronic countermeasures. We shut down all their air defense systems, and the other plane did 10 simulated bombing runs.
On the average, Americans work between
back end where our hero of radiation toxicology and radiation safety, a consultant for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, KEPCO and other, and I think you're working in the Nuclear Navy now, and that's your radio name, Chris Harris. You got an E&E News last week, and the booming voice of none other than the Tim started off with that clip that got posted up, and then, of course, your intellectual dissection of the horrors of what's going on in I can't believe that they call that they're going to somehow fix this situation in the TEPCO and the Fukushima Daiichi plant. Now they're even talking about the ice wall, which is the latest we talked about. And, of course, at the end of that clip, I had a few last licks about the omnicide and the coming, extinction level event. We're getting on E&E News regularly because we're bringing out issues that basically months or years before anybody else, and we don't get an echo response. Like, what really disturbs me is I'm not seeing other nuclear experts at your level, Chris, literally saying kudos or, oh my God, or he's crazy, why is he saying these things? It's not scientifically correct. The reason why, because it is correct. It is scientifically valid. And the latest, of course, is they're starting this new system for this ice wall, which, by the way, they use around slurry ponds here in America to stop the giant deposits of slurry from their coal mining, which is not done properly. They just shear the top off mountains, which I think is nuts. And here in the United States, and they just use these ice walls for minor things. What they're trying to do in Japan is unprecedented, to put an ice wall to hold radioisotopes, which are hot, And hot things like to penetrate through ice. So I don't see how they expect hot radioactive isotopes and corium to be restrained by an ice wall created by a refrigeration unit. These people are nuts. They've missed that class in physics, haven't they?
Yeah, I'd just like to say also that actually we got on ENE News at the word for your program and the ability to bring out truthful, knowledgeable people that are willing to talk about the subject, and there would be nobody else that wanted to step up to the plate. Apparently, even some of my colleagues. But I appreciate that very much.
And by the way, I want to say this for all those people who've got marginal.
Dr. Bill, I just had lunch with my pastor, who is an Orthodox priest, very well educated man, and I was talking about this, and I said, we made the main news site, and he said, you don't hear about Fukushima anymore, and I said, well, yeah, from the mainstream media, basically, you don't. But it's not going away. It's getting worse.
Tim, let me revise that, okay? We're number 3 now on downloads, audio downloads, on Genesis Network, right after Alex and Joy Brown. We just got a new contract to get a far greater exposure with commercials, podcasts, etc. We're going to soon move up to number 1, okay? That's the reality, because the content of our shows is superior to anybody, anywhere. Now, I want people to understand this. The level of qualifications that I have and people that I bring on, like yourself as a history professor and Chris Harris, is unparalleled. And when we talk about these things, we don't talk about them secondhand. Okay, I was a member of the nuclear division of ACOM. I have a background in nuclear physics and radiochemistry, toxicology. I took care of the Savannah River plant that makes our nuclear detonators. A nuclear plant south of Chicago, I was their doctor, and Rocky Flats for toxicology with the NOVA workers under Reserve Admiral John Hughes for Rocky Mountain Ahmed. People need to understand, when we say these things, I want to stir up controversy. I want people to say there's no such thing as a stupid question. I don't even know if you're a member of the public, if you're a radiation expert, or if you're a medical doctor, or you're a nurse, or just a grandmother that's concerned about whether your grandson is going to be born in 7 months and is going to have a birthday effect from radiation accumulated from Fukushima Daiichi because you're drinking the regular water and eating food that's got radionuclides being bioconcentrated. You need to understand out there, what we're saying is the media. The rest of it is a distraction. I call it the snooze-tainment. I call CNN the cartoon news network, Fox the faux or false news network, the MSNBC the vomit news network. All these networks basically are controlled by, these 6 media are controlled by the Sabbatean wizards, otherwise known as the wizards of Saruman the Magnificent, wizard. These are, I would call, it's a real hell. And by the way, we are all Christians, and I happen to be a Kohenic descendant of Moses. And Chris is, by the way, a Messianic Christian. You're a Greek Orthodox. We're all Christians. And the reason why we're doing this is not because we're really driven atheists, agnostics, or whatever, or egomaniacs. We're doing it because we love God and we love mankind. Even when they spit on us and say, you people are nuts, I challenge them out there to say, is Chris nuts? Call him to the show and tell him why technically he's nuts. Tell Tim Alexander why he's nuts in his geopolitical analysis. Tell me not why I'm nuts about the radiation toxicology of how this is going to destroy the biosphere. I challenge you out there to say it. And I get sometimes what I call really stupid emails when people want to do anonymous attacks. Don't waste your time. I have what's called spittle-proof skin. Okay? There's a British saying called lick spittle. People need to understand this, so you probably know that, Tim. They need to understand we are men of spittle. We are in our sackcloth and ashes. We are crying out like the ancient prophets, like Ezekiel. And we're telling people, repent, O America, repent, O world, for you shall die shortly in your sin. And when we see Fukushima,
we have people like Chris here, who is a true expert, and when he gets up and says this stuff, people should listen, because I'm going to tell you, this is a life extinction event. It's not going to kill us all tomorrow, but 20 years from now,
last year I had a discussion with Dr. Tim, I had a discussion last year with Dr. William Ray, who set up the Dallas Environmental Clinic. He's the founder of the American Academy of Environmental Medicine 35 years ago. He was a former cardiologist that got sick from anesthetics, and he's such a genius, he actually invented the science of environmental medicine. Now, I'm one of the grandfathers of it as well. I started because I was an ecologist and was an oceanographer and was one of the founding members of Greenpeace over 40-some years ago. I've been at this thing longer, it's soon approaching half a century, okay? So these are not minor statements we make here. God has been in control of my timeline and yours, even though you were going to have a giant news service until your wife got ill. God knew you the future. He knows the future for God. There's no such thing as a past, present, or future. He knew someday Chris Harris was going to be on this program telling the truth to people, because we're not even getting a negative response. We don't even have the disrespect of the media to say, we'll bring on Deagle or Harris or Tim Alexander and even talk about these things. We don't even have the disrespect anymore. Where is our disrespect? That's what I want to know. Because it would open up a dialogue where they would not be able to hide the truth anymore. And the worst thing is not just that Fukushima happened. They're opening up over the reactors. They're trying to at OI and elsewhere. They're trying to reactivate these damn reactors in an area in a fault zone where there's 500% more level 5 earthquakes or higher. They haven't solved the problem, and they're opening up post-geriatric reactors. And the same thing is not just there. All 5 reactors in Switzerland are all sitting on fault lines. All of the areas of the world, we're seeing massive increases in volcanism and earthquakes because gravity waves are coming in from deep space, because there is an approach of the destroyer Herculebus, or the destroyer about the ancient Cartouches in Egypt and Sumer. We're seeing the approach of the destroyer that comes back every 3,600 years, which Moses knew about because he was a ancient, we call biblical Kabbalist. He knew the star signs. He knew the approach of the destroyer because he was trained by the high priests. He was fully aware when God called him to let the people go of ancient Israel. And he knew that it was going to cause the volcanism, would cause Thera to blow up and destroy the Minoan kingdom, which really isn't Minoan at all, from King Minos. It's the last remnants of the Atlanteans. That's what it was. People need to know that fact. And that's what released the ancient Hebrews. What we're seeing right now is with this giant earthquake that hit Nepal, all these earthquakes around the world from off of Newfoundland and Iceland that just happened a month ago, all these things are happening. Earthquakes and volcanism is increasing, including release of methane hydrates from every ocean in the world, not just the Pacific. And you can't have nuclear reactors in tsunami zones, earthquake zones like the New Madrid fault system, where they don't even have structural analysis to say these are going to be able to withstand power blackouts and structural damage or subsidence caused by thixotropic soil. So when we come back, we're going to hear more from Chris about this new so-called coolant function test from these maniac liars that are putting all of us in the entire biosphere in extreme hazardous danger, because we are at the time of the end. Back in a minute. The real issues come here, and I hope that E&E News realizes this. The disaster of Fukushima is really bad, but the fact that they are presenting and saying that they are putting in robots and have done several so-called experiments where they knew the robots would fail, now they're going to continue to put a failing ice wall, which is they have to do a grand failure to prove that, yes, it is 200 years before they have a solution, while they kill the biosphere. And people need to grasp just how serious this is. The fact that our government won't do anything is even worse than the fact that they put in geriatric plants, even had a MOX reactor, reactor number 3, creating nuclear weapons-grade plutonium pellets, which means the Japanese are violating international treaties, creating advanced nuclear weapons. And people don't remember this, but the Oki Maru, which is a ship that was bringing radioisotopes after the fall of the Soviet Union to Japan, a large amount, and Greenpeace and other organizations were trying to block them from getting to Japan. Remember, they were following them, tracking them this as well, like 20 years, some years ago.
That's right.
At the fall of the Soviet Union. People need to realize the third nuclear power after the United States and Russia is Japan. The Chinese basically are toast. The Japanese have, by the way, the second most advanced satellite launching system on the planet after the European Space Agency, which, by the way, is a better launching platform than ours right now. And the best rockets in the world are called the RD-80 rockets, built by the Russians because of a different engineering status. I took care of the engineers and Lockheed Martin, where they would ship them out in Pepsi trucks, because under license, they were building Russian RD-80 rockets in Littleton, Colorado. I was their doctor. I know this firsthand. I've been in the plant. I've seen the rockets. So people say, how do you know all this stuff, Deagle? Firsthand. How about that? Not reading somebody else's book, going to a website or whatever, being there. So taking care of employees at Rocky Flats, the next most radioactive place on Earth besides the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, being a radiation expert on hazmat activities at a Savannah River plant, which makes our plutonium detonators for our warheads. I know this stuff firsthand, including the designs of these nuclear weapons and the design of these nuclear plants. And Chris, this ice wall, how crazy is this, what they're doing now?
Well, it's another attempt at, remember what we talked about last week was containment is a myth there, and this is some kind of a remedy to contain at least a portion of the flow that comes in, that's basically underground streams that come in clean and get contaminated and head right on out to the sea. So really, is it going to work? I hope so, but I don't think that that's an actual.
Okay, well, first off, you have to look at where's the ice wall located. The ice wall is located on the site of Fukushima. It's not a mile above or so, with a giant concrete or other wall to divert the entire aquifer. That's what I've been saying. They need something fixed to divert the entire aquifer, which is an underground river going under Fukushima Daiichi out to the ocean. Second, they need a containment basin beyond Fukushima to take that water and convert it to solid radioactive waste, because we have the science. We need to have Kevlar spider silk tents over every facility. We need to know where the corium is, and we need to put in what's called injection of hyperosmolar boronated water and scalar signaling to cause what's called mega hypercrystallization of that boronated water to form boronated crystals to trap the neutrons. Our two enemies are water molecules and neutrons. And the neutron flux and the water molecules, if we can control those two, we can then entomb this as what we call crystalline boronated sarcophagus and stop calling it a remediation of a plant that's being put into remission. It's not. It's a nuclear demolition site, and it gets worse and worse by the day. Since January, the amount of radiation that's increased and released there is 7,000 times more radiation than previously ever peak level measured since March 11th, 4 years ago. That's how bad it is. And people need to grasp that what's going on here. And I've said that here's the progression of this. The orca whales are not singing. The starfish are falling apart. The salmon run is gone. The smelts are gone. The seaweed kelp forest, they're not going to report on it properly from the Kai Vetter and the University of California, Berkeley. We're going to have more lies from marine biologists and other idiots. They're going to try to say lies like it's global warming. And at the same time, it's going to start killing the upper growing parts of trees along the British Columbia coast. Even the carrion birds and insects are dead there. We're going to get Dana Durnford back on the program because he's now completing his 6-month study up there. And I'm going to ask him some very tough questions. I know he's been on the program with Jeff, but I can ask considerably tougher questions than anybody else. And the reason is I've been there. I'm a marine bacteriologist. I understand the marine environment. I'm an environmental toxicologist. I'm going to ask him tough questions, and this guy is going to tell me straight up. He's a Newfoundlander. He's a genius at his work as a marine ecologist on both coasts. He's been in the West Coast for some 20-some years. He knows this, and he cries when he hears that the whales don't even sing because there's no babies. Do you understand what's going on out there? We're talking about one of the most intelligent species in the marine environment in the world, and they're all dying. Do they not think the human race is going to die soon? Are you idiots out there? Do you understand that when the forests die, you get giant forest fires? The largest forest, boreal forest on the planet, is in the west coast of the United States and Canada. The largest and oldest boreal forest on the planet outside of the Amazon rainforest is going to start dying. And when that happens, and when the population gets so radioactive in Vancouver, Canada, Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, let me tell you, and it's not just there because the radiation is being carried in the high atmosphere at 26 to 30,000 feet. It dumps it across the Rocky Mountains, dives across the Midwest, heads up to the Northeast, and it also goes transpolar right over to Eastern Europe. What's going to happen is the Northern Hemisphere, and by the way, it pulses giant waves of radiation to the west coast of Africa, Australia, from Brisbane all the way down, and New Zealand. So they're not safe down there in the Southern Hemisphere. There's also, in contradiction to Dr. Caldecott, a oceanic stream that carries radiation directly, not across just Hawaii, but directly to Ecuador and northern west coast of South America. So fools out there that don't know actually any air current traffics or the transoceanic and transequatorial high-altitude water streams, there's 300 times more than the Amazon per day. You people out there need to get a reality check. We are royally, cosmically, and geopolitically screwed in every way. And we need to have some truth-telling here to fix this damn problem.
Yeah, there's all kinds of, the first several centimeters of the surface of the ocean, the air-sea interface is threatened by the cesium coming across too, and that's a really important layer. I am not an accomplished marine biologist, but I did take a couple of oceanography courses, and there's a lot going on in there, and certainly that gets messed up too. So, no, there's a whole slew of different aspects to this.
Let me ask you a question. There's three different literally classes of how radiotoxins interfere with biological life forms. The first is the radiations released, alpha particles, beta particles, high energy electrons. And then the second is integration of those biological molecules or replacing normal isotopes. For example, cesium replaces magnesium and calcium in the body and strontium-90. What happens, cesium-134, 137, these have long half-lives, so when they bioaccumulate, even if it stopped, it would take 4 half-lives or over 200 years for it to be gone from the biosphere. Some of them, like, for example, plutonium has a half-life of 26,500 years. Depleted uranium has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. Billion with a B. What we're talking about is radiotoxins that are going to get in the environment. They do two things. Firstly, they displace normal biological molecules. They damage DNA, and real sneaky ones like tritium, they call DNA intercalation. They actually slide your codons, and they don't have a half-life. When tritium's made, the only way to get rid of it is what's called hyperdimensional scalar biophysics, where you hit them with what's called frequencies in the gravity wave section, which are in the fifth dimensional platform, which travel faster than the speed of light. That can shatter the micronuclei of these isotopes and shatter them to non-nuclear isotopes. Nikola Tesla already wrote letters to the scientists working on radium and radiotoxins, Madame Curie, and told her when she was developing a claw hand that he knew and he had technologies that could get rid of radioisotopes and change the T1 half, which is why when gravity waves are released by the sun before the ultraviolet light is received by the Earth after a CME, the gravity wave actually changes the T1 half of isotopes on the planet at faster than light speed before the light even arrives, along with the photons and the other particles. So people need a grasp here. They'll tell you it's 200 years, although they're hiding in Warehouse 13 technologies to deal with this because they're trying to kill all of us and sterilize and dumb us down and destroy us. If you think this is a conspiracy theory, you are a fool going to die in your ignorance. Turn and repent to the Most High God and realize that we need to get active and need to steer these politicians and ask some tough questions because our nation needs to turn back to God. We need our scientists to open their damn mouths and, as I say, where the hell is my disrespect? Where is your disrespect, Chris? Where's your disrespect, Tim? Where is our spittle? If they'd at least dialogue with us, even with vile comments, we could respond with logic, compassion, and the truth. But they won't. Will they?
They're scared of the truth.
They're scared of us. God help them.